All right, grade eights. Today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going over our first assessment for your Middle Ages unit. And what it's going to be is it's going to be a letter to the king assignment. So far what we've gone through in the Middle Ages is we looked at feudalism, we've looked at the impact that the fall of the Roman Empire had on setting the course or the setting the stage for the Middle Ages. And so what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be getting you set up on the writing of this assignment, or at least the brainstorming behind it. So what it is it's a letter to the king, and it is in the voice of, or from the perspective of a character in the Middle Ages. Okay, so following along on your sheets, these are the essential questions. How did the looming warfare and violence dictate how people lived during the Middle Ages in Europe? So we talked about this already. How did it shape people's ideas? How did it shape how they lived? How did it control or contribute to systems of control? So the feudal system and even the church to an extent controlled people. So we're going to be learning about that. And then the second question is, why were people so vulnerable? Okay, so fall of Rome, stuff happened. You're going to need to explain what that stuff was. I'm not going to explain it right now because that would be giving you the answer, which I'm not in the business of doing immediately. Okay, so next part is, let's read through this together. So it says, following along in your sheets, although most people who lived during the Middle Ages were illiterate, letters could be written through a scribe, often a member of the clergy. So for those of you who don't know what the clergy is, it's like a person that works for the church. Also, some kings saw the benefits of education and would often encourage schooling of their younger children through the church, although it would be a very basic education. Okay. Nonetheless, appointed by God, the king's sole purpose was to protect and make decisions in the best interest of his people. This was not always the case, but certain kings, such as Alfred the Great, exemplified what it took to be a great leader during the Middle Ages. It is obvious from our study of the Middle Ages so far that people are going through some dark times. In this assignment, you're going to write a letter depicting just how dark these times have been, looking for answers from your king. Okay, so essentially what's happening is you are taking on a perspective and you're writing a letter, either affirming the systems or lamenting. Lamenting means just like complaining about the way life is, right? Life is difficult, more for others than for some. So you're gonna have to figure out whose lives were like horrible during the Middle Ages, who had it pretty good. Why were their lives the way they were? Okay, so let's take a look at the assignment details right here. So it says you are going to be responding to the essential questions through the form of a letter to your king. So you're writing a letter. You're going to be taking on the medieval character, or you're going to be taking on the persona of a medieval character, and that will be up to you to choose. But whatever your letter, like the contents of your letter, can be dependent entirely on which member you choose to be, right? So if you are a member of the clergy, your letter is going to be very different than if you were a serf who, is dictating this to a scribe who's writing it to the king on your behalf. Obviously, because if you're a serf, then you don't write because you're illiterate, but maybe you're talking to a scribe and he's writing it for you. Okay, you're obviously going to need to do a little bit of research on your persona, and that will dictate, all the kind of evidence that you give in your letter, which is going to be presented to the king. Your letters need to be about 500 to 650 words, so that is approximately 2 pages double-spaced to 2.5-ish pages double-spaced. Okay, so before you go about drafting your letter, you need to pick a member, or you need to pick a persona, okay, or like a character. Okay, so you can be either a priest or a nun, monk, bishop, so a member of the clergy essentially. That's option 1. Option 2 is you can pick the nobility character, right? A person that comes from wealth, a duke, a count, a lady, etc. Okay, so again, in order for you to write an effective letter, you need to know what these people's lives were like, right? And so you're gonna have to do some research on that. You could be a knight. You could be a freeman or peasant, blacksmith, miller, carpenter, one of those things that we talked about during the feudal system. And then finally a serf. Okay, and obviously serfs, they have more to complain about in this system than anyone else. So if you want to write like a ranty, angsty, lamenting, sad letter, then maybe you pick a serf. I don't know. It's up to you. All right, some writing tips. We are going to be spending some time today creating your backstory for your character, which means that like backstory just means like who are you, right? Getting to know your character, getting to know what the lives of people in the Middle Ages were like. So in order to write a very like persuasive, accurate letter, you need to know who your character is. So obviously you have to do some research. Okay, so you have to create an engaging letter. So things like where do you live, how old are you, what kind of family do you have? These are all things that will inform your letter. Think about the relationship you have with your king. Do you respect him? Is he a good king? Do you believe in the divine right theory? Okay, so these are all things that can be raised in your letter to the king. Okay, so think about all these things. So what I would do if I were you is I would do some research on the Middle Ages. I would look specifically at certain regions, right? Because, feudalism affects all of Western Europe, right? And so, if you're a knight in England, your experience might be different than if you are a knight in Germany, so the details that you have are going to be based on your research. Think about what you may be feeling in this moment of time. So pick a time period, right? So maybe it's like 1350, right? You've researched like the Middle Ages. This is like a historical time period that you are interested in because there's lots of warfare and you're writing from the perspective of a knight. So maybe your letter is going to have something about warfare. I don't know. It's up to you. So what would you like to see change? What are you content with? You can share your worries and kings with a dream, or your worries and dreams with the king. Okay, it's an opportunity for you to be heard. Okay, so the question that you might be asking yourselves is like, what do I write about? I guarantee you, I'm not in the room right now, but I'm sure this is like the immediate thought that some of you had. In which case, don't worry. We are going to be doing some brainstorming. So what you're going to write about is entirely dependent on your specific perspective, right? Who you choose to write that perspective from. For example, if you are a serf, you need perhaps protection from Vikings, and you need to ensure that your crop yield is good. Those are things that you might be concerned about. Your letters need to creatively answer the essential questions. Therefore, your letter have to include the following. They need to demonstrate a solid understanding of your character and your role in medieval society, and then you need to show an awareness of the violent and unstable times that you're living in. Okay, so in your letter, these things need to come up at some point. Yeah, so essentially that's it. You're going to be given a couple work blocks, one work block to actually do some research, and then another work block to start drafting your writing. And I will be informing you more of the deadline in the following classes. Okay, so that's just a quick overview about the assignment. So if you have any concerns or questions, of course, ask me, or just refer to this video if you like zoned out halfway through and forgot what it was that I said. It's a good thing it's a video. Cool beans. All right, so that is all. So that's it.